Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. As you can tell by the title, today I'm going to be telling you all about my experience growing up with major depressive disorder. Now, last week I released 2 videos all about this disorder. I went through the DSM, told you the diagnostic criteria, the risk factors, the course of the disease, the cultural differences, all of those things. So if you missed those videos, make sure you go back and watch them so you can understand a little bit what I was dealing with during these years. Those last 2 videos that I did were more general to major depressive disorder. Today's video, I'm going to be specifically talking about my experience growing up with this disorder, how it was to live with these sorts of feelings from a small child, and in this video, I'm going to go all the way through high school. My next video, I'm going to be talking about what it's like living with depression as an adult, because I have had very different experiences as a child versus as an adult. If you're new to my channel, thank you so much. I'm so glad to have you here. My name is Devin, and I make videos all about mental health and chronic illness. As a really young child, I remember being relatively happy. I definitely had my issues with anxiety, which I explained in my video where I told you all about my experience growing up and living with generalized anxiety disorders. All of these links should be down below in the description, but if you can't find them there, all of these videos are available on my channel. So I was definitely an anxious kid, but I would not say that I was an unhappy kid. I had my issues, but for the most part, when I was a very small child, I went to school, I went to dance, I had friends at daycare. I was anxious and I was uncomfortable sometimes, but it wasn't terrible. I didn't have this terrible, awful childhood, at least not when I was really small. Honestly, I don't remember a lot from my childhood. My memory's not great. That is not uncommon for people who grow up with mental illness to not remember things very well. When I think back to when I was a small child, I just remember playing with my friends and going to dance and just being a kid, probably worrying a little more than most kids should have. I definitely stressed myself out. I was a perfectionist, but I was just a kid. I mentioned earlier that I really don't have the best memory, and this is something that I have no recollection of whatsoever, but my mom tells me that she remembers very, very vividly. It was before my parents got divorced, but she doesn't remember when, so I was probably 4 or 5, somewhere around that age. So I was a very small child, and I went from being this happy-go-lucky, I have ADHD as well, so I was a hyperactive kid. I was all over the place. I had friends, I was at dance, I was at school, I was always talking. I was a kid. Like I said, I may have been an anxious kid, but I was a kid. And then I just stopped talking. I completely isolated myself. My mom said I wouldn't even speak to her. And at that point, me and her, obviously, when you're 4 or 5 years old, your mom is everything. So I wouldn't speak to her. I wouldn't talk to anybody. I didn't want to play with my friends. I just wanted to sit in the corner and not speak. And my mom was really worried. She took me to the doctor to see if anything had happened to me. She took me to the doctor probably every day for a week, maybe 2. It was a while, she said. I do remember that. She was taking me to the doctor every day for a while. Now, the doctor she was taking me to was actually a nurse practitioner, and she was the wife of my pediatrician. So it wasn't like a mental health professional that she was taking me to, but she was taking me to a medical professional who had training in children and to see if children had been traumatized in any particular way. So she took me there, and I talked to the doctor, and I spent a lot of time with the doctor, or the nurse practitioner, I'm sorry. And the nurse practitioner came up to my mom afterwards and was like, I don't know what's going on. Nothing seems to have happened to her. Nobody's done anything to her. I don't know what's wrong, but she'll grow out of this and she'll be okay. It's just a phase type of thing. We don't know what's happening. Nothing specifically happened to her. Just kind of monitor it and she should grow out of it. Obviously, I did grow out of it because I don't remember it at all, but my mom remembers it really vividly. And now, as an adult, looking back, she has said that she believes that that was my first depressive episode. So that's kind of hard to think about, that I've been dealing with this disorder a lot longer than I believed. I originally thought that I started having mental health problems when I was in middle school. And the more I go to therapy and the more I kind of look back at these stories and look back at my life, the more I realize that no, it started from the day I was born. So it is believed that I had my first real depressive episode at about 4 years old. I wasn't diagnosed with anything then, obviously. I grew out of it and I was okay for the next 8 or 9 years or so. Fast forwarding a little bit now into my middle school years, and if you've watched my previous videos about living with generalized anxiety disorder, you'll know that I did not have good middle school years. I don't think anybody has good middle school years. You're awkward, you're going through puberty, you're dealing with peer pressure and all of these social politics, but then you're also trying to figure out who you are. You start having feelings you've never had before. It's a lot on anybody. But during this time, 2 other major life events happened that kind of broke me, I guess you could say. The first was that my mom got laid off. It was during the recession. It wasn't anything that was necessarily her fault from what I'm aware of. She got laid off because they were downsized. And she took it really, really hard and she started drinking a lot. She had always drank casually before, maybe a little too much, but at this point it got ridiculous. She was going to the bar every night. She was drunk every day because I guess she couldn't handle the loss of her job. And I mean, understandably, when you're a single mom of 2 kids and you lose your job, that's a lot of pressure. But she started drinking and I started taking on more of the parental role. I had to take care of her. I had to worry about the house because she would get drunk and tell me about all of her financial problems and how she couldn't pay for the house and how we were going to have to move. So I was worrying about keeping our house. I was worrying about keeping my mom safe. I was trying not to let her drink and drive because she did that with me in the car at one point and we got into an accident. I didn't want anything to happen to her. So I had a lot of anxiety and worry that really didn't help. And then on the first day of 8th grade, I came home from school and I saw my mom and my uncle on the back porch and was like, what's going on? And they told me that my aunt died. This wasn't the first death I had experienced. My great-grandmother had died a few years before, and my cousin actually died 3 months before my aunt did. So I had dealt with death, but it was more distant at that point. But my aunt dying was the first person who I had been very close to. She was the fun aunt. I would go over there and laugh and play and just like not have to worry about anything in my life. She made me feel special. God, I'm gonna cry. Honestly, she was a lot of things that I wished my mom could have been for me. So in a lot of ways, it was like losing a parent. I know I didn't actually lose my parent, but she was like a parental figure to me, a mom figure that I lost. And something in me at that point switched. If you watch my previous video, you'll know that it's very common for a major life event, like a death in the family, to then cause a major depressive episode in a person. And I think that's what happened here. But it's almost like after this, I couldn't get out of it. Living in my house after my aunt died was almost unbearable. My mom had already lost her job and now had lost her only sister. She was drinking even more. She was terrible to me. When my mom gets drunk, she likes to take out all of her emotional anger onto me. And I'm not going to get too much into that now because that's going to be another video. But it definitely impacted my depression when my mom would get drunk and tell me how much she didn't like me and how terrible of a kid I was. When you're trying to grow into yourself, when you're a teenager trying to figure yourself out and you have your mom getting drunk multiple nights a week and telling you all these terrible things about yourself, and you're already dealing with depression and all of these terrible thoughts and all of your anxieties, it only gets worse. It feels really weird to talk very openly about some of this stuff. Some of the stuff I haven't spoken about before. Some of this I've only talked about to my closest friends. So I'm a little uncomfortable right now. Please excuse my anxiety hands. This is all anxiety. But I started self-harming my 8th grade year. And if I could go back now, I really wish I could go back. because I would stop myself, because unfortunately what I started in 8th grade, this dumb decision that I made, started a lifetime of struggle. I have dealt with those thoughts almost every day since. It has been a while since I have acted on any thoughts or urges to harm myself, but I still have them. And here I am 13 years later, and I'm still dealing with something that I started when I was 13 years old. I also started thinking about ending my own life at this time. I don't think I had any real plans. I was just done. I was in so much pain. I didn't know how to deal with anything. For a while, I numbed myself to anything, and I'm pretty sure there was a period of like 6 months or so where I did not cry, because I couldn't, because I wouldn't let myself even feel that kind of emotion, because any emotion was too painful. I really struggled all the way up until high school. And once I got to high school, I started to not be able to struggle on my own. At this point, I was isolating myself almost all of the time. If I wasn't at school or at dance, I was in my bedroom alone, maybe on the computer talking to people online, but I didn't hang out with friends. I just wanted to be alone. I was having feelings of worthlessness, of guilt. I was sad all the time. I was pissed off all the time. I was having thoughts and urges of harming myself. I was actively harming myself. I was having thoughts of ending everything. It became too much, and I finally felt like I needed to say something to somebody. So I went to my brother, and I went to my brother multiple times. I can't even tell you how many times I cried on his shoulder. For those of you who don't know, my brother is only 3 years older than me. So while I started having these issues when I was in like 9th grade, he was only a senior in high school. He was having a lot of problems himself. He was obviously dealing with all of the issues with my parents and my mom's drinking on his own. He had his own traumas, and now he had his little sister coming to him, like screaming, bawling her eyes out every night about how she didn't want to be in this world because it hurt. And he didn't know what to do. And I did this for probably a year and a half before he threw his hands up and was like, I can't do this anymore. We need to do something. And at that point, he took me to a teacher. The teacher took me to the school psychologist. I had a really bad experience with the school psychologist. Immediately, once she heard that I was having thoughts of ending things, but also that I was actively harming myself, she immediately believed I needed to be hospitalized. So she called my parents and told them I was in immediate danger to myself and that I needed to be hospitalized and evaluated right now, because she thought that I wasn't going to make it through the weekend. And I was pissed, because that's clearly not what I said. I was sitting here trying to get help. I maybe wanted to go to therapy. I don't believe that I was really considering medication at that point. I'm not sure. But I didn't want to be hospitalized. I didn't want to have to go to the ER. And I didn't want the first time my parents to be hearing about the fact that I have any issues, have it be the school psychologist being like, yeah, your daughter's about to jump off the building. You might want to do something about it. Like, what? Since then, I have learned that hospitalization should only be used in very extreme cases. You should not be pushing people into hospitalization like that. She freaked out. There is a difference between harming yourself and ending it all. There is a difference. And I guess she didn't understand that. I got to go home and get screamed at by both of my parents. My mom was yelling at me. I remember at one point she literally said, well, what are you going to do? Just start cutting yourself now? And I looked at her and said, Mom, I've been doing that for years. She was very taken aback, but she just got more mad and she started screaming more and yelling at me. And that's kind of a pattern. When I deal with mental health issues, I get yelled at a lot. I didn't know what to do. We agreed as a family that we would go to the hospital, but I had dance class that night and I didn't want to miss it. I told my parents I was going to be safe because I had told the therapist that I was going to be safe all the way through the weekend. She just didn't believe me. They let me go to dance class on Friday, and on Saturday we went to the hospital. Now, we didn't end up staying in the hospital long. There was a huge snowstorm. The doctor that was supposed to come evaluate me didn't make it into the hospital, and my parents didn't want to wait. We didn't want to get snowed in. So they just let me go home. And from there, I was able to start getting help. And I started therapy, and they put me on antidepressants for the first time. They put me on Prozac. And my mom said that she saw such a difference in me almost immediately. So I was on the right path, I believe. But we came into some issues because I couldn't drive myself to get treatment. I was only 15 at the time, I believe. Either way, I didn't have my license. So I couldn't drive. I had to rely on my mom. I had my walls very much up. I did not enjoy my experience with the school psychologist, and I didn't trust this new therapist. I thought that she was going to do the same thing to me. I was honest once, and they tried to throw me in the hospital. I wasn't going to do it again. Or at least that's how I felt at that point. And my mom wasn't taking me regularly enough because she was working full-time, but she also had a full-time job at the bar drinking. So I wasn't going nearly enough. And I remember my therapist at one point looked at me and was like, "We're not getting enough done. You don't come consistently enough for us to actually do any work. Every time you come back, you have your wall up. And every time I try to break it down, there's too much time in between sessions so you can build it right back up again." I didn't know what to do with that. I was literally being told by my therapist that I shouldn't be coming in anymore. My mom clearly didn't even really want to be helping me in the first place. So I stopped going, which is not healthy because I also just stopped taking my medications because I wasn't going anymore to get refills. So I just stopped taking my antidepressants. I stopped going to therapy. And my parents thought that everything was a-okay for the next however many years until I was hospitalized again. That's a story that we're going to be getting into in the next video though, because I was an adult. But anyways, I guess my parents thought that that was good enough. They thought that those however many sessions I had, 5, 6, a few months of meds that I then abruptly stopped taking, which is very dangerous, and I was cured. And I didn't really do anything else to try to take care of my mental health until I became an adult. Now that is where I'm going to end this video. In the next video, I'm going to pick up with me as an adult living with major depressive disorder. I'm going to go through the process of how I went to get help, how I was hospitalized, and kind of how I now live with this disorder every day. I hope you learned a little bit about growing up with depression from this video. This disorder is a hard one. It eats your soul. It eats your heart, it eats your soul. It's exhausting. But with help, it can get better. So if you believe that you or anybody else that you love is dealing with depression, please, please, please reach out to either your primary care doctor or a mental health professional so that way you can get the help that you need to live and thrive even though you may have been dealing with depression. Thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the end of this video. You have no idea how much your love and support really, truly means to me. Please make sure that you click the subscribe button, that you ring the notification bell so you'll always know when a new video is posted, that you smash the like button for me. Any comments or questions, leave them down below, and I will see you next time.